Welcome to the Business Growth Masterclass, where business growth is made simple. Listen as we interview real business owners and learn from their wins, their losses, and everything in between. Today's guest is a retired senior vice president over operations for UPS all over Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and former president of Eastern European Missions and the current president of Lubbock Christian University's Foundation. And so without further ado, welcome to the podcast, Mr. Bill Bundy.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I'm excited to have you. You've always been a colorful character, full of stories, and I've just been wanting to get you in here and just hear some of those stories you have to share.
Well, I like sharing them. I like telling some stories because I think that people learn from stories. I think they're good ways to convey a good message. So
I agree. I know I floundered through your former title at UPS, and so kind of tell me, what did you do at UPS? I know you were over a bunch of people all over Europe, and I really, that's about all I know. So what did you do for UPS?
Well, I started here in Lubbock, Texas, unloading trailers. That was my first job at UPS. College student at Lubbock Christian University, and at one point, they started this group to load package cars for the drivers. Drivers had been loading themselves, and so I was one of the first 10, what they called preloaders in UPS in Lubbock. So we loaded the vehicles for the drivers. And after about a year, they asked if I wanted to be a part-time supervisor over that group. And I took that, and that was it was actually probably one of the most valuable experiences I ever had, because I learned when you load and learn how to load the vehicles and understand how the drivers do their routes, all right, you kind of start understanding what UPS is about.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so, and I was there when UPS got their first computers, and I'm thinking this was probably 1978, 1979, TRS 80s. We called them Trash 80s.
Okay.
And there was a group from our corporate office that came down, and one of them, who was the CFO of UPS at the time, our chief financial officer, Ed Jacoby, was on the audit team. And he said, "You know how to use that thing?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So he automatically assumed I had a college degree and that I was educated and all of that. And within not too much long after that, they asked if I wanted to work in accounting. And I had never taken an accounting course. But I said, yeah, because it was full time, and that was good. So long story short, I really learned accounting through them training me, sending me to different schools. I went to a number of different schools. But UPS was very good about training people, and worked my way up actually as an accountant. All right. And then probably in 1988, I became kind of the CFO for the East region of UPS, that was where really big business was. At New York City, New Jersey, all along the East Coast, Philadelphia, and that was my first exploration into the East Coast. All right. But it was a really, really great experience, and I still like the East Coast. But from there, they asked if I would do something in corporate. Our CEO was a good friend of mine, and he eventually asked if I wanted to get into operations and start a business in UPS in North America called Service Parts Logistics. And we established a network that we could deliver parts for, namely computer parts, but sometimes automotive parts as well, but namely computer parts for businesses. And we established a network. You made the call, we could have someone there with a part and repair it in 2 hours. So there was about probably 15, 16 different companies throughout the U.S. that did that. We acquired 2 of them, and they named me the president of North American operations for that. And that was a lot of fun, most fun I ever had for 2 years. We established that network, built it, and then they decided they wanted to take that same concept to Europe. We found out pretty quickly the European Union was European Union in name only. Those borders were still pretty strong, and you couldn't just move product across those borders. You had to export, export and import everything. So, like in the U.S., you can ship stuff from Texas to California, et cetera. You don't have to have anything but a shipping documentation. Well, in Europe, to go from the Netherlands to Germany, all right, you had to have significant documentation. So we learned pretty quickly we had to do something a little bit different over there. And after they asked me to be there for about 6 months to establish that network, we finally got it established, and I stayed there for 10 years to get it going. So it was good.
What years were you there?
I was there from 2002 through 2012.
Okay. I need to take a step back, because you mentioned New York, New Jersey in the 80s. What was that like? Those are some exciting times for that region of our country.
No, it was very exciting. I mean, they were. I got to do and meet with a lot of people. I actually had one business meeting with Donald Trump.
Okay.
We were doing he was building the Trump Taj Mahal in Atlantic City, and we were arranging transportation for products to come there to help him finish, that, because a lot of it came from Asia and places, and we had a hard time with his people getting an agreement. So we finally had a meeting. They invited us to Trump Tower so he could intimidate us, and we ended up coming to an agreement with him. But it was booming, and we moved there from Montana. And
your family moved there from okay.
Yeah, which was a huge cost shift. Montana, very cheap cost of living. New Jersey, very expensive cost of living. But I had offices in Staten Island, New York. I had offices in Edison, New Jersey, and Secaucus, New Jersey, right across from New York City, and on 43rd Street in New York City. So enjoyed it, actually. We enjoyed living in New Jersey for those 6 years.
Okay, so you got to have a negotiation with Donald Trump. Okay, I bet that was exciting. Were you in the room with him, like across the table, or?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, we were in the room, and you could tell. I mean, this would have been like 88, all right, and you could just tell that when he walked in, who the boss was. And I remember his first statement was, whoever, if the person that can't sign this contract isn't here from UPS, this meeting's done. And so is our business with UPS. And so I said, well, I can sign the contract. And he goes, okay. And what impressed me was how he was extremely intelligent on our business.
Okay.
And after about 2 hours of discussions, I had a couple of engineers in the room with me that kind of designed what the network looked like. He finally just said, okay, what is it going to take for you guys to do this? And I said, well, there's a lot of risk in this. You got product coming from India, you got product coming from Asia. There's a lot of risk with the timelines that you're looking at. So, we're really going to need to have a margin of 25, 28% for this business. And he said, okay, we got a deal. And, we went out and had lunch, and, of course, I would have never dreamt where he would be. All right. But it was pretty interesting. It was very interesting. And I was impressed with how much he knew about what we did.
Wow. Okay. So East Coast in the 80s, and then starting a completely different arm of UPS. That when I think of UPS, I don't think of kind of this entrepreneurial spirit, but it sounds like there was a lot of that in the 80s and 90s, really developing that business.
Well, when I first moved to our world headquarters is in Atlanta, Georgia. And
Okay.
so um, they asked me to come up there as a group of 6 people that were called the Strategic Planning Group. All right. And I was the financial person that was in that group. We had a couple of engineers. We had a couple of guys that were operations people. We had some marketing people. All right. But there was just 6 of us. And a part of our job was to look for other elements of revenue streams that fit in with what UPS does. So I remember studying this thing called service parts logistics, getting in front of the board of UPS and talking about how this lines up very well with UPS because we could do the deliveries. All right, we could get air. We could do a lot of the air business. I mean, this lines in really well with what we do from a delivery perspective. Although the repairs is outside of what we do. Um, and I made that presentation and didn't think much about it till about 2 years later. We had a new CEO, a guy by the name of Mike Eskew came in. He called me up to his office and he said, "Do you remember giving that presentation on SPL?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do." And he goes, "Get that book out again because we're going to get into it and you're going to run it." So it was a lot of fun. I mean, when you're starting something new and you're hiring people into this big company called UPS and trying to really intertwine those cultures together, which was the most difficult part of it. Getting the operations down was not that difficult. Culture, was a big part of it. UPS had pretty stringent dress standards and appearance standards. Our competitions and the people that we purchased did not. All right. And there were some compromises on both sides, but mostly on their side. We pretty much drove the UPS culture into them, and those that survived, some of them got up to our top levels of management, before they retired. So it was really good. I enjoyed that a whole lot.
Okay, you're a humble guy, and I'm going to let you hang on to that for a little bit. But you graduated from LCU with, what was your degree?
It was a liberal arts degree.
A liberal arts degree, and you're loading trucks in Lubbock, Texas, to starting complete divisions of a global company. How what is kind of your gifting in that? Like, how did you find yourself there? Like, you did accounting and you kind of grew up in the company, earning your stripes. But what is your superpower in all of that that really differentiated you and allowed you to progress the way you did?
I always was pretty confident that if that I could learn to do whatever it was that somebody needed me to do. So I was never concerned. I never had a lack of confidence about being able to accomplish something. Um, I think when I got into the senior areas of management, the thing that helped me the most was, and I think really the best talent I had was finding really good people to work with me. All right. People that could mesh together, people that didn't have, huge egos. All right. People that were in it, for what was good for UPS, and for our teams. And I think I was pretty good at assembling work groups that worked pretty good together, and that was in the U.S. not so challenging, in Europe extremely challenging because
Yeah.
I had 22 different country managers, and uh, some of them didn't like each other. I mean, their countries did not like each other. All right, there was some pretty big rivalries there, but um, I found people that were, that could really look and say, for the benefit of what we're trying to do, or this is the best thing to do. And I do really think that was probably the biggest key to my success. I heard one hire that kind of changed everything for me is a guy by the name of Remco van Berg. He was a Dutch,
What was it?
Remco van Berg.
Okay.
He was a Dutch guy that was brilliant, probably the smartest person I ever, but understood business in Europe, understood how to move, how to get things through the different countries, understood the difference between how Switzerland was not a part of the EU and how you dealt with that. All right. Understood the cultures. All right. Remco could speak and write 5 languages fluently. All right. And he gave me a lot of really, really good advice. Um, and he was surprised that there was an American that would come over and take advice. When I got to Europe, Europe was really kind of in pretty bad financial shape. And Remco, as he put it, was like they wouldn't listen. People wouldn't listen. You brought the Americans over here, and there's things you've got to do different. In Italy, you've got to understand the culture of the Italians, all right, to be able to get a really productive team. All right, so we made some changes and we made some shifts, and those things worked out pretty well for us. But I think I was pretty good at picking people that were really intelligent, that knew what they were doing, and were good team players.
Wow. Our listeners of this podcast are kind of the typical, small business owners and kind of the young up and coming leaders for businesses, and being able to build a team. We say this often, the job of the business owner is to build a team that can run the business better than they can. And obviously that is a huge strength and superpower, to the nth degree, for you to be able to do that, not only in the US with, we're all sinners with people here, but then cross culturally throughout Europe. How do you go about developing that?
Well, I think if you really treat people fairly, all right, and if you really actually do not ever try to sell somebody on something that is not good, you have to earn their trust. So when there were decisions that would come up and they would say, hey, here's what we really should do with this. And at UPS, if there were things that were kind of against that, I would go to bat for that. If I agreed with them and said, you know what, I think this could work. I think we could do this. One of the main things that took place that was very, very difficult was in France. We were really struggling financially, and our staff got together. We just said, hey, here's what we need to do. And one of our people on the staff was a French country manager. And we said, there's like 3 pieces of this business we need to shed. Well, that's about 11,000 people. And UPS did not want to do that. All right. I mean, UPS was like, we need to go out and create a market for those people that we can do. This was a little bit outside of what our normal core business was. And UPS was saying, no, we need to go out and create the market for that. And we basically said, there's not a market big enough for these people. We've got 11,000 people. Some of these folks have not performed a job in the last 18 months, but we continue to pay them.
Wow.
So, when we did that, all right, and I was the one that kind of went to the board and kind of took all the heat, about, why would we spend this amount of money? Because it was a significant amount of money. I mean, it was probably €500,000 or €500 million. All right, to make that happen. All right, but we said we needed to do it finally got the board, to buy in for it. We did that, and it worked out to be very, very good for us. We actually got that back probably in about 2.5 years. So
Wait, so y'all had to we had to shed 3 portions of that was it France? In
France,
that
yeah,
French business, 11,000 jobs.
yeah.
Wow, that is heavy.
Yeah, and you got to understand too. In Europe, they have these. In France, especially, when you hire somebody, you basically pay for them for life.
Really?
Yeah, so I mean, a big chunk of that cost was okay. So we no longer have those businesses, but we had to retrain those people in other areas, which we were responsible for the payment. That training. All right. We had to pay into their retirement accounts for a period of time, et cetera. It was an extremely expensive proposition, and but the good thing is most of those people actually did want to work. So they went out, and when we trained them, they actually got jobs and stuff like that, which kind of reduced the cost over the long haul for a little bit. But the initial cost up front was pretty heavy.
Goodness. Okay, so it, developing that skill set of building teams that are cohesive and work together and thrive together. Obviously, like you're a very relational guy, and have a high emotional intelligence. But for the small business owner listening, a lot of times it's just supporting your people.
Yes.
Getting to know them, believing in them. When you're hiring someone who's really good at this one thing, they're taking a load off of you, the business owner or the leader. You're hiring this person who is an expert at this one thing and letting them do that. And if they have a different opinion, you should probably listen to them.
Oh yeah, I got to tell you, I mean, one of the best things I ever learned, and I learned it in Europe, was you have got to find the right person that knows how to do what you need to get done. All right, and whether that's dealing with the works councils, which is what we would call the labor unions,
Mm-hmm.
in the U.S. All right, and someone that can deal with the cultural differences between the the people that you employ. All right. So, we had engineers that were most of them were from either the US or from the Netherlands because they they just produce good engineers. Um, but I had to send those folks out into these different countries, to do things. All right. And I had to trust that they were going to be really good at dealing with the different cultures. All right. And what I found out is I needed people that actually knew a lot more than me
Mm-hmm.
working for me. And I think everybody finds that out at a point in time. If you're going to have some success, you need to have people that know more than you do about what you're doing.
That's a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow. A business owner is kind of a do-it-yourself kind of guy, pull themselves up by their own bootstraps, and there's a maturity that you reach, as a business owner of that
Yeah.
realization of I need people smarter than me.
Yeah.
I if I'm the smartest guy in the room, I'm in trouble. And there's a book, it's called Who Not How, and the main concept of the book you perfectly described is basically when you come to a problem, rather than you personally thinking, how am I going to do this? How am I going to solve this problem? How am I going to figure out how to go from, Germany to France to whatever? Rather than thinking, how am I going to do that? Thinking, who do I need? Who can I go bring on with a team who knows how to do that better than anyone?
Yeah.
And as a business owner, that's you've got to operate. Once you're at a certain level of income, that's your next mountain to climb. That's the thing to figure out is how can I build this team of experts that can run this business better than me?
Yeah. And I mean, I really looked for people that understood the value of what we were doing. rather than just the cost of what we were doing.
Hmm.
All right. Because we provided a value add that most companies couldn't, as it relates to being able to track packages, as it being able to expedite, shipments. We had the ability to do a lot of things that added value to what a customer may not need all the time, but when they need it, they really need it. So I actually look for people that kind of look for ways to provide value adds, all right, rather than just ABC services.
Mm.
And that makes a big difference. I mean, our marketing people could go out, our salespeople could go out and sell a solution that might only need it 10% of the time, but boy, that 10% of the time when you needed it, and those were the things that were very critical, I think, to us being successful, because if you can do those things, they're going to trust you with everything. So it worked out pretty good to have these creative minds, all right, that were looking for things that added value and would come to me and say, "Hey, Bill, you know what? If we could intercept a package going from Germany to New York City and get it back to another location, all right, within 24 hours, that would be huge." And I'm like, give me some examples. And I can remember, this guy Uwe giving me all of these examples of things that would take place once a shipment left, and these were cars, this were auto parts, and so we did that. We did this thing called Rapid Intercept, and that's how we marketed it. And we generated a lot of business from that. And then when we showed people we could do it, a lot of those customers started turning more business over to us. So it was all good. It was all good. And I wouldn't have wanted to do any of that, because it was risky.
Yeah. Yeah. You ended that with it was all good. I'm sure there were times where it wasn't all good when, you know, something hit the fan
Oh yeah.
and you guys were scrambling. So can you maybe describe, I mean, what a completely different world, navigating that versus the US. What were some of the harder days and lessons you learned from some maybe bigger mistakes?
I will tell you, the hardest lesson I learned was when I was in the US.
Okay.
And there was a very lucrative business. And this is going to, I mean, but it really was basically transporting human organs for transplants. All right. And not only the organs, which we didn't do a lot of the organ transplant, but the medical equipment that would be needed, the sterilized medical equipment that would be needed to do these transplants. Um, and those calls were very few and far between, but every one of those, when we would ever get one, I mean, they aged me significantly, because that was literally, I looked at all of those as kind of a life and death type situation, and I can remember the worst failure we ever had was we made the delivery of the medical tools needed for a surgery to the wrong hospital. And we could not recover in time to get it there, for that. Um, and I don't think there was a fatality due to that, but it was a serious, situation. Um, and that's when when you have things like that, that there are things that you don't control completely. You don't want to let go of it because there's a lot of goodness with it. All right. But that one was after a couple of incidents that were pretty scary like that. I was like, guys, I don't know. I don't know that we don't own the transport vehicles that these go in. We don't, if it was UPS, then we could dictate how those things go, but we don't, so, and we don't own the delivery agents, at those hospitals, et cetera. So, uh, one of the hardest things I had to do was to say, this was a piece of business that I encouraged us to do. This was a mistake.
Hmm.
We should We should back out of this. So after we had contracts for about 2 years, and then after those 2 years, we didn't renew any contracts and we backed out of that. So whether we should have stayed in it or not, that's somebody could say yes or no, but I just thought it was time not to do that.
So distill the lesson from that. What change? What lesson did you learn, and what did you change from that experience?
What I learned from that is, there's always going to be in any business, there's going to be conditions that you don't control. All right. But when you start putting your business in the hands of people that you really don't control or employ, all right, you take a big risk because they say they're going to do what you ask them to do, but they may have other priorities as well. So, what I really kind of learned from that is you want as much control as you can on your business. All right. The things that you can't control, try to limit the amount of things that you really don't control as it relates to a process that you do.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And if you can own 100% of your process, own it. All right. I am not a big fan of necessarily outsourcing. All right. But I think it's a very good business strategy. All right. When you take something that somebody's built an expertise in, that you don't have that same expertise. All right. So you can do that. But when it relates to what we were doing from a transport and logistics perspective, we needed to own that process more. And we didn't. And we weren't going to be able to unless we bought some of these very high end aircraft carriers, that we just, we wouldn't have generated enough revenue to support that.
Mm. So conceptually for the business owner, business leader, controlling, every day you can only control what you can control, and that's what you need to worry about. But whenever you're talking about the good or service that you provide, looking at the things that are outside of your control, what measures can you take to mitigate that as much as possible and understand the risk as much as possible, and then make a decision. Is it worth the revenue, worth the potential risk there? And that's something every business, whether it's, ingredients to make an end product, or a plumber, ordering hundreds of water heaters, how exposed are you? And if you are exposed, what are some strategic measures you can take to mitigate that?
Well, and one of the things too, that I see with a lot of people is, technology, all right, and utilization of technology, and everybody wants these systems to do all of this, well, and they're right. I mean, you want to have good technology, right? But your technology and your systems are only as good as your process. So you need to have process. You need to understand from A to Z, from your business perspective, what are the things that have to take place for me to be successful? And then if you don't have a good process, your system is going to mirror that poor and I see people spending a lot of money on technologies and systems without really understanding what their process, needs to be.
Well said. Yeah. That's designing that well with the customer in mind. There's another book I love, one of my favorite books from last year, Unreasonable Hospitality. And the main concept from that book is to look at every piece of your business and how that impacts the customer, and how can you tailor that to deliver the best product, the best service imaginable. And going through that exercise to understand every piece of your business and how it impacts the customers is such a invaluable thing. Okay. Talked about some high stakes losses. What was like the big win that you remember from your time that, that you're proud of?
The big win for me, and it was kind of a game changer, I think, for Europe as well. when we built this network of service parts logistics in the U.S., our main customer, the one that we kind of benchmarked everything off of, was IBM.
Hmm.
All right, they had IBM engineers everywhere, and they were very big. When we went to Europe, all right, you had IBM was there, all right, Dell was there, Acer. They had a lot of different technology companies, etc. The game changer for me, though, was when we, um, after many months of kind of talking about a global plan for Dell, all right, being awarded that contract that first time, all right, to do things, and it was by far the largest contract at that time that UPS had signed. Um, but it allowed us to invest in a network, you know, um, that we could put other things on top of that network,
Yeah.
which would be extremely, good business for us. And everybody wanted that same thing. I mean, Dell, IBM, Acer, you name Hewlett Packard, HP. I mean, they all wanted, the ability to have a network that they could get their parts, all right, and their equipment to the people that they sold it to, in a very short time. And in Europe, that was much more difficult than in the U.S. And the timelines were less stringent. We didn't do a 2 hour per se network in Europe, but for the most part, it ended up being fairly close to that. So I think the biggest I just remember I was here on thanks. We were living in Europe, but we were in Lubbock at my son's in-laws' house having Thanksgiving lunch, and I got a text from the person at Dell saying we're going to sign the deal because Thanksgiving wasn't a holiday in Europe,
Yeah. Yeah.
So I got this thing from Shannon, Ireland, from Dell. We're going to sign the deal. It was a really good Thanksgiving for me.
Yeah.
That was a good Thanksgiving. But I think that was that kind of changed things for me a little bit as well as within UPS. So
That concept of starting a new, maybe it's a different product or service that you're going to offer in your business, and figuring out initially how can it break even. That's what I think of with
yeah,
that Dell contract is how can it break even, and then once you can figure it out, that you've de-risked it,
yeah,
and and you can make that investment, and then everything on top of that, it's profit.
yeah.
It's
It's
great.
all
It's
good.
gravy after that. And so I think, the business owner listening is when you're thinking of a new product, when you're thinking of a new service that you want to offer, it's how can I make this pay for itself as soon as possible? And if you can start with that, you're going to be a lot more successful.
Yeah, and you got to have a product that's good.
Yes.
I mean, um, one of the greatest lines I ever heard, and I wish it was mine, but it wasn't. Was we were meeting with a client, and I was with my guy that was my lead sales guy in Europe. And this client looked him straight in the eye and said, why should I choose you over DHL or FedEx? And he pointed to his UPS lapel pin and he says, because we will never let this shield look bad. And the guy signed the deal. I mean, and I think that statement meant a lot to this guy that owned this company, looking for us. Uh, But after he said that, I knew if I'd ever get the chance to use that line, I'd use it. I never did get the chance to use it, but I thought it was a great line because it's true. We did not want to disappoint the UPS. We didn't want people to be disappointed, in the product, that we did. So we wanted to differentiate ourselves as being the best.
Mm.
So I thought that was, I still think that's one of the best lines I ever heard.
I like that. What I wanted to bring you on. I knew you did a lot of international business, and I wanted to kind of broaden the listeners' horizons a little bit. And what advice would you have for, a small business owner or a business leader to explore? Like, what are the first steps to explore any kind of international business?
I really think you gotta, whatever that business is, you gotta have someone that would know what that market looks like in Europe. Um, there are things that we do in the U.S. that I don't think are viable markets, in Europe. There were services that we offered at UPS, all right, that weren't viable, for things in Europe. So that you've got to understand kind of the differences of what doing business is. Ours was a service. So if it's a product, all right,
Mm.
that's a little bit different. I mean, you kind of got to know if you've got something that differentiates you from a European product. And, if you expand, what is your ability actually for growth to kind of hit a market that's already out there, or a product that's similar to what you've got. If it's something new, then I think that's a little bit different. But if it's a product that kind of exists and you think you've got a better product, then, if you're X and you got a better product than Y, and that's what you're wanting to sell is a better product, then I just think you got to have somebody to really do a good exploratory for you on, what does this market look like, in Europe? And in saying Europe is, I would also say it's not just Europe. I mean, you need to look at it by country.
Mm.
All right, so people don't realize this. Germany exports more product than Asia. All right. And main reason is because Germany services a lot of the European countries, and everything that leaves Germany is an export. So, Asia, it has to come somewhere. All right. They don't have this geographical, closeness that Germany's got for that. Um, but Germany, if you're going to do anything in Europe, is a key market. All right. And if it's not going to bode well in Germany, it's probably not going to bode well, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
You know, but really just kind of understanding what the dynamics of what that is. There are some countries that are big users of products, and there are countries that are big producers of products. Germany happens to be both of those, more similar to the U.S. than any of them.
Where do you go to find those people that can help navigate that and kind of help you with the exploratory portion of that?
We actually went. I just looked at. I went to our competitors
Mm.
initially to look for people that kind of understood, what the markets were. All right. That's a good question though. As it relates to products, I would just kind of look for people that sell those products and just have discussions, and find somebody that has relationships or knows what the European market does as it pertains to whatever those products might be.
Good answer. Okay. Are you still, I mean, you're retired. You're retired now.
Yeah.
Are you still plugged in with UPS? You still keep up with them much?
I keep up with them a little bit. I was very, very good friends with the guy that was the president of UPS Airlines.
Okay.
He and I were really, really close. He worked with me in Europe, for about 4 years, and I mean, we were really close. And since he's retired now, I've kind of lost a lot of that touch, but I still get a lot of communication from him, and from him, and from some people, and some of my best friends that I will forever be friends with were friends that, I worked with at UPS. So,
And now you're retired and you're a busy man. What occupies your time now?
Lubbock Christian University for the most part.
Okay.
As president of the foundation, I've really enjoyed that.
What does
Uh,
that mean? What does the foundation do?
the foundation actually, the foundation was really set up to establish the nursing building.
Mm.
So the foundation actually owns that building. So the foundation is responsible for the maintenance and all the upkeep, et cetera, of the nursing building. We have a fantastic relationship with Covenant. All right. And we generate a revenue stream from Covenant that we use to support Lubbock Christian University in different ways. Um, and it is really establishing a board that is friends. All right. And that likes to be involved with things at LCU. and being able to continue to support and maintain and make sure that the nursing building continues to do well.
Okay. So you were a Lubbock Christian grad and couldn't get enough of it. That's what you spend your time doing now.
I do. I have never really. I was on the board for about 30 years.
Okay.
All
I
right.
had 30.
Yeah.
I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah. I was on the board I think I got on the board in like 1989, and
Out of the womb, you got
yeah,
on the board. Okay.
yeah, and so when I took this job as president, I couldn't stay. I couldn't serve on the board, so I stepped off the board to kind of be the president of the foundation. But I had two kids that graduated from there. All right, I've got a grandson that's there right now. Next year, I'm going to have him, and then I have a granddaughter that is going to be a cornerstone scholar there next year.
Exciting.
So she's going to start there next year, and there's going to be an influx of the Bundy clan, kind of
another influx of
going into LCU. But I've always appreciated the things that I learned there, and I can tell you there were times when I can remember being at a meeting with a city council person in New Jersey. All right. And the guy was actually trying to hold us hostage for a certificate of occupancy, and he says, "Hey, for $30,000, you can have this." And I can remember this guy, Les Perrin, one of my teachers, telling us in a history class, the one thing that you always got to do is you got to, sometime in the morning when you get up and get ready to go anywhere, you look yourself in the mirror. You got to live with yourself, so never do anything that you think is going to come back and haunt you. Never do anything that can come back and bite you. Always be honest and upfront. And I just remember thinking about that as I was going through that, thinking, man, we need this CFO, but we didn't do it. Delayed our opening by about 3 weeks, cost us a ton of money. Is the right decision, though.
Yeah. Wow. All right. I think it's time for a fire round.
Okay.
All right. Bill, what is your favorite movie?
The Sting.
The what?
The Sting.
The Sting. What is that?
Is Robert Redford and Paul Newman.
Okay, I know both of them.
All right, and
is there a car involved in this?
It's about a guy who had been in prison. All right, got out of it, and he was con man. And one of their buddies, they did a con, and they conned a bigger con man, and one of their buddies got killed because of that. And they set up this elaborate scheme called the Sting to get this guy back.
Okay,
it's a phenomenal movie.
I would recommend.
It's I've watched it 100 times, and it's a great show.
Okay, The Sting.
Yeah.
All right. Aside from the Bible, what's your favorite book?
I remember reading a book when I was in high school called Rifles for Wadey. All right, and it was a book about the Civil War. And it was a tremendous book about a family, and I think it was a true book, a true story about a family's life when their two sons went to the Civil War, one for the North, one for the South. All right, and how that family actually still came together at the end of it's a great book. They should have made a movie about it. It was a great book.
Okay. Rifles for Wadey.
Yes. I think it was Waitie.
Okay. I feel like we had to read that in high school. I don't remember. All right. This next question, what's a common piece of business advice from your industry that you don't necessarily agree with?
That everything is driven by cost.
Okay.
All right. Because I think the thing that people will forever appreciate, and continue to pay for is quality. And it's not just about who's the cheapest. I think it's about who provides the best.
I like that. Good answer. And then lastly, how can people get in touch with you and get in touch with Lubbock Christian's Foundation and help help support that in any way, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, the best way is, you can email me. All right. And my email address is bill.bundy@lcu.edu. All right. And I check that all the time. Come by come look at Lubbock Christian University. Beautiful campus. I mean, people don't realize it. Lubbock Christian University's got a great campus, beautiful campus. Come by the campus and visit me. I'm in the administration building, and I'd introduce you to our president, Scott McDowell. His office is right next to mine. So come by and just talk, and we can go and look and see and do the things that you would want to do to find out if you would want to be somebody that would support Lubbock Christian University.
I love it. I love it. I appreciate it. You had some good stories. You did not disappoint. I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
No, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of talk to people. I will say the most difficult part of retirement for me has been when I was working. It was all about who I was at UPS, and man, when you leave that, I had a great staff of people that would do whatever, and had that camaraderie. And man, when that goes, it's tough. So I would encourage everybody, build relationships outside the business.
Mm,
All right. So that when it is time, you don't feel that gap. You don't feel that hole. And I felt a hole for a while.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, your life, your whole
Yeah.
family moved across the world.
Yes. Yeah.
Great answer. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
All right. If you enjoyed that podcast and those stories, go ahead and click subscribe and come back for the next one, because there's plenty more where that comes from. And if you are a business owner or business leader who feels stuck in your business and you can't work on your business, go to our website, stagcoaching.com. And in the upper right-hand corner, click to book your free consultation. And your free consultation, we can help tackle the number one issue negatively affecting your business and give you the next 3 steps to try to get your business unstuck. Thank you, and we'll see you on the next one.